Starting this coming Sunday, we will be looking at the theme, Discover Your Mission Now. And the sermons will be around this. We have that book. It's going for 300 shillings. If you haven't yet got one, please make sure you get one at the end of the service. And it's just going to be one easy to read chapter per week. And then we meet together in our small groups. We will study together in our CLGs, talk about what we are learning, spur one another on towards love and to good deeds, so that we don't just stop at knowing our mission, but we start learning how to live it and put to practice the things that we are learning. Every week we'll have a memory verse that will just be part of reinforcing the lessons. And one thing that you have when you've done a memory verse, it becomes yours. It'll always help you into the future as we grow in God's word. And all of this aligned to help you discover your mission now. And not just to discover it, but to engage with it. It's going to be a very simple, very practical series and spiritual emphasis campaign. And I can tell you this, when we put to practice the things that we will be learning, it will change your life. And it's not just your life that will be impacted, because you're being equipped so that your life becomes different and becomes a vessel through which the Lord will be working. And God will be working through you, and it will be impacting others. Your life will be enriched, and through your life's enrichment, you will be becoming a powerful tool in the hands of the Almighty God, touching many people's lives, people around you, in the way that Jesus is calling you, in new, very real, very powerful ways. This, as we discover our mission now, as we then take the step to fulfill and to live the mission that God has given to us. And today, as we prepare for this, I want us to look at the Great Commission that Jesus gave all of us. He gave this to the universal church after his resurrection. And actually, it's a theme passage for our church during this year. It's Matthew 28, verses 18 through 20. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age. All authority in heaven and where? And on earth has been given to me, to Jesus, to our Lord Jesus." So how much authority does he have? He has all authority, and that is total sovereignty. Jesus is king in heaven. He's king on earth. And this ultimate king, this sovereign who is over everything, commissions us. And so, brothers and sisters, we are commissioned. We are commissioned, given marching orders by the ultimate sovereign. All authority is in him. And so he says, "Go, and I will be with you always." At the center of that instruction, at the center of that commission, there is a core command. There are other things that we are doing around it, but there is a core command. What is that command that he gave his disciples? To make disciples. You and I, the disciples of the Lord Jesus in the world at this particular time, are called to make disciples. And anyone who becomes a disciple of Jesus is commissioned by the Lord to make other disciples until the very end of the age, until he comes back, until all things are closed down. And our prayer is that there will be faith on earth. When Jesus asked that question, will there be faith on earth by the time he comes back? There will be faith on earth, because we will be faithful. And we will do the things that God is calling us to do. He is with us until the very end of the age. Now, there's a problem among many of us. There's a reality. Most of us don't consciously participate in doing what Jesus has asked us to do here, what Jesus has commanded us to do. We kind of think that making disciples is the work of a few experts, a few, special people, pastors and evangelists and teachers and specially gifted people. Many times we're thinking that most of us, that discipleship is a class. And it's for people who have recently become converts, and we need to pump them with a lot of content. We give them a lot of verses, we teach them a lot of doctrines. And yes, discipleship does involve learning stuff. But it's much, much more than that. It's about learning how to be like Jesus, how to live like Jesus did. And it's something that the Lord commanded all of us to be doing all the way to the very end of the age, passing it on to others, helping others understand how to live the way the Lord commanded us. Another part of the problem is that, when we hear this command, we think, Jesus sent, all of us to be preaching and making people to become converts. But I'm not good at that. Whenever I'm, talking to an unbeliever and I think about, sharing the gospel to them, telling them about Jesus, I freak out. I break into a sweat and my heart starts beating and my hands become, clammy and the words just don't come out right. It feels so unnatural. And maybe some people will start thinking that I'm a fanatic. And on top of that, I think I've tried sometimes. And when someone says no, I feel such a failure. Does anybody connect with those kinds of thoughts? So many times we are caught up in these real challenges. Sometimes the people that we love the most are the ones we find most difficult to tell about this. We really want them to have a connection with Jesus, but somehow we find it so difficult to tell them. Sometimes we can tell a total stranger. For example, after you've done a course on evangelism, maybe during the time you're doing Mizizi, and you've been trained a little bit on evangelism, and you have a prayer partner to go with you, and you meet a total stranger. It's much easier at times to tell someone like that, just to spout out all these things that you've been learning while your evangelism partner is standing next to you and praying. Easier than telling your brother, your sister, your friend, your close person. And so, in a sense, a lot of us Christians, we know this command, the Great Commission, but we really do very little about it. We feel bad that even when we say something, it doesn't seem to come out right. We can't handle the no, I'm not interested. I don't really want to become a Christian. And even when those kinds of words come out in a very, very polite way, it feels so much like rejection and like we failed. And we failed Jesus. It's like we are on an exam. We are in an exam, and the marker is that person that we are sharing the news about Jesus with, and we're failing, and we feel so bad, as though we are disappointing not just ourselves, but we feel we're disappointing our precious Redeemer and Savior. But something, people? Part of the problem is that we've not read the command properly. What does it say? It says, make disciples. Go and make disciples, not go and make converts. And when we read it that way, when we read it, go and make converts, we are giving ourselves work that is not ours, that Jesus never expected for us to do. And it's a burden that we cannot carry. Only God can bring people into the body of Christ. Only God can make them true Christians. And the other person, by the way, always has the choice. You can do the best job at pointing people to Jesus. They might even start, liking what you're talking about and start walking and doing the things that you are teaching them from the ways of the Lord because of what they see, because of what they hear from you. But they are still responsible to say yes to Jesus, to open up their hearts to the Lord. Jesus himself said, this is the verdict in John chapter 3, verse 19. Light has come into the world, but people love darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. Jesus himself was saying this. When he was on this earth and he was sharing his life, people would choose yes, and some people said no to him because they have a choice. They can choose to go along their own path, or they can embrace the light that is Jesus Christ. And as we'll see, only God can bring them ultimately. Even when they are saying yes, it's only God who brings them into the faith. These two jobs are not ours. Our job is to help people see that model, to see the path towards Jesus, towards God, and to help them to walk it so that they come closer to God. Have you had those kidogo pangs of guilt that you're not doing quite enough to bring other people towards Jesus Christ, to bring them to Jesus Christ? I remember one time talking to one of our CLG leaders, and she was saying, that has been one of our problems, that we wonder, what can we do? We feel so guilty about of this. And I want to tell you, let go of that guilt. Let go of that guilt and embrace your calling as Jesus' follower. And we're going to help you. This is part of what we want to do as we look at Discover Your Mission Now. We'll be learning some simple, practical ways where we not only discover our mission, but we start to live better lives that will be better at pointing people towards Jesus, helping them to see, who Jesus is and how they can obey his ways. Making disciples is our call. And I want to look at a few questions that are related to this Great Commission and just look out and pick out a few answers. And the very first question that I want us to look at is, where is it that we start? Where do we start? And we start at becoming disciples. And by the way, we have in your bulletins, you had a little outline, an insert that you can follow along. I haven't followed it exactly. I've taken preacher's prerogative. But I'm sure you'll be able to find the places and you can fill in and you can write your own notes on the side. But the first thing as we start, the first thing is becoming disciples. You can never pass on what you do not have. And so the beginning of this journey is your relationship with God. What is a disciple? A disciple is really a special type of learner or student. He is a follower who is learning not just to know what he's taught, but to think and to act like their mentor. Jesus said in Luke 6:40, everyone who is fully trained will be like his teacher. And that's your goal. That's your goal, to be like Jesus. Jesus is our model. He's our example. He's our goal. And we learn to be like him not just by hearing stuff about him, but by observing him and learning from him. How do we do this? By reading the Gospels. We can see from those books in the Bible how he lived, what he taught, what are the things that were important to him, what his life meant. And we learn from the whole Bible because, we see God who is being represented in the whole scriptures is the one that Jesus is representing. Jesus was a perfect representation of God in the flesh. And we learn from other Christians. We see them as they live out their faith. We learn from them, not just what is commanded, but how to act in accordance with with what is commanded. Do you remember that command? It says, ultimately, it says, make disciples, teaching them to obey. Not to know, but to obey. And that's really a core part of becoming a disciple. Obeying everything that Jesus taught. And by the way, I want to give you some really good news. Sometimes we look at that and we think, wow, that's a big mountain, to obey everything that Jesus taught. There's some really good news, that God is committed to your discipleship. He is committed to help you to grow and to succeed. In Romans chapter 8, verses 28 and 29, there's an amazing promise in this passage. I'll read the New Living Translation, which just makes it so clear what God is doing. And he says there, and we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purposes for them. For God knew his people in advance, and he chose them to become like his son, so that his son would be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. So here we are hearing God is engaged in your life, and he is working. All the things that happen around your life, he is working those things together, and he is working towards this goal, that you would be like Jesus. And so really when we recognize that God is engaged with us, what we are doing is aligning ourselves together with him. Becoming a disciple, people, is a lifelong path. It's a lifelong journey. It's not just a class that you do. God wants you to become more and more like Jesus. More and more like Jesus today than you were yesterday. There's always something in which you're going to be growing. There's always room for more growth. But there is another amazing promise, because even though somehow we always feel we'll never get there, God gives us this promise that he will actually complete this. In 1 John chapter 3, after saying, that, we don't know what Jesus will look like because, he's in his perfect form right now. So we might not know exactly what he looks like, but he says in 1 John 3 verse 2b, but we know that when he appears, we shall be like him. God is saying, I'm going to do this. God is your partner in this journey, and he'll make it work. Our job is to align ourselves to him, to become a disciple that is actually following his master. Now, Jesus gave 2 commands. We've sort of got a paragraph that's in your notes there, discipleship simplified. And Jesus gave 2 commands by which we can evaluate everything we think, say, and do. It's love God and with everything that you are, and love your neighbor as yourself. And that's from Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 to 40. And I'd like us to read that passage. I'll start from verse 37. 36 is just touching on what the lawyer asked. And Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. And that's all the Bible summarized in these 2 commandments is love God, love your neighbor. And this is simple. Even the youngest child, once the child starts to understand a little bit, understands love and can understand this particular instruction. But it's also a very profound and deep instruction, that it's a lifetime journey for any of us to really discover and become all of it. Even for a professor of theology, it's a lifetime journey. Love God with all your heart. That's all your desires and compassion. The seat of your passion is your heart. Everything that is driving you is just this desire for God. Love the Lord with all your soul, which is the center of your will. So you're determined and making decisions on this basis that you are going to express your love to God, and that's the way your life is going to be patterned. Love God with all your mind. And this is, your thoughts, the stuff that you put inside your mind. What is it that you decide to watch? What do you read? What do you listen to? How do these things reflect your love for God? In a parallel passage in Mark chapter 10, verse 30, Jesus adds another word. He says, love God with all your strength. And it's fairly obvious what that means. It's everything that you do. Everything that you are doing should show the love of God. In Colossians chapter 3, verse 23, it says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for men. Not for human masters. And the question is for us, is everything that I do an expression of my love for God? When I'm in the office, when I'm doing whatever else I'm doing. I mentioned this a few weeks ago. We talked about this. This is how you can test everything that you're learning from the Bible. This is how you can test everything that you think and say and do. Just asking this question, how does this express my love for God? And how does this express my love for my neighbor? And we're doing this and we're checking on this, we become disciples, and we'll keep on growing and becoming better and better disciples. So we start at becoming disciples, getting onto the path of following Jesus' pattern in our lives. The second question is, where is it that we are being sent? And the answer is right there in that passage. Make disciples of all nations. The whole world is our mission field. Wherever we go is our mission field. And leading us then to number 3, which is, when is it that we make disciples? What is this process? When do I start? When do I stop? Do I do it only when there is a class? No. It's as we are going, in the regular living of life. Some of you already know that word go in the Great Commission, in the original Greek, it's actually a participle. It's a different kind of word. It's not an actual verb. It's not the command. The command isn't go. The command is make disciples. Go is like a participle, and is really telling us, as you are going, make disciples. And how do you make disciples? Baptizing them, teaching them. Those are the things. But, because it doesn't transfer so cleanly into our English, we just write go and make disciples. But it's really saying as you are going to work, as you're going to school, as you're going home, as you're eating, as you're interacting with your children, as you're talking with your friends, as you're hanging out in this place or the other, as you're doing the things that you've been called to do in terms of your work and other places, you're being told, make disciples. As you are living out your life in the everyday moment of life. So how do we do it? How do we do it? It's the whole world. It's everywhere we are going. And it's as we are going. In the process of our going, we should be making disciples. How do we do it? And our example is Jesus. We do it as Jesus did it. In John chapter 20, verse 21, Jesus told his disciples, in the same way that my Father sent me, I am sending you. So how did Jesus do it? That's our model. The first is consciously. He was always aware what his mission was. And he was aware that people were looking at him and they were learning from him in everything that he did. And we too must also live with that awareness that we must be conscious. You have been sent. In 2 Corinthians 5:20, Paul announces we are Christ's ambassadors. You've been sent, you're his agents. An ambassador is a full-time representative of a country or a kingdom in another country, in another place which is not home. And just imagine for a moment an ambassador who forgets, what he's supposed to be doing, forgetting who he is and what he represents while he's in another country where he's presented his credentials. What happens when an ambassador, does something shameful or misrepresents his country? Just straight away there's going to be a reaction, isn't it? He is going to be sent home. How do you forget who you are? How do you forget who you're representing? I mean, that can't be allowed. That should never happen. And I want to let you in on something. As brothers and sisters, we are Christians. You are a Christian. You are a Christian. And if you are a Christian, this is what Jesus left you on earth to do. And you're either doing a good job of it, a medium quality job of it, or a really bad job of it. But you are his representative. You are his ambassador. Now, I know most of us will be able to say, you must have heard someone say this, as you've interacted with people. Maybe you said it at one time or another yourself. I know so and so. And that person is a Christian. And if that is what Christianity is, I want nothing to do with it. Have you ever heard that? This is an example of someone who is an ambassador but is doing a really, really bad job of it, of showing people what living like Christ wants, living for Christ looks like. People know that you are a representative of Christ, that you represent Christ. And how you live and walk and talk and the things that you do around with the people and the world around you, it tells them something about the Lord. You are the Christ that they can see. There's a time when it was very fashionable. It was the in thing for us to say as Christians, but, what I really want them, you shouldn't be looking at me. They should just look at Jesus. Do people still say that these days? Don't look at me, look at the Lord. It sounds very holy, doesn't it? But God has appointed you an ambassador. Jesus has sent you as his representative. He is saying that they should look at you. He's not expecting you to be perfect, by the way. That will happen. That's a journey we won't complete this side of eternity, but we've already seen God's promise. We will be totally perfect. This is a guaranteed thing and it's done. But he is expecting you to represent him. He is expecting you to represent him, and we must be more deliberate in using our lives to point others towards God. When Jesus called his first disciples, he told them to come and see. And he was giving them direction that they might see the path to God. And there's something very interesting that comes, and which is our next point. He was inviting them to observe him and to be around him and see what he did, learn from what he said, be together with him. And so he wasn't just teaching them stuff. He was modeling. And they could see how he lived, what he stood for, and learn from him that way. Learn how to do those things that he was doing. And Jesus himself had a model. In John chapter 5, verse 19, he says, the Son can do only what he sees the Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. So his model was God, and he represented God on earth, and he commissioned us to follow his example as his emissaries, his apostles, his ambassadors. And what we had to do is to help people see God's way and to learn how to live God's way. Not just to know God's commands, but to obey the commands, everything that he has taught us. People, making disciples isn't just when you're actually teaching somebody the doctrines of Christianity. A major part of making disciples is living our lives in a way that helps them see God's life in us. You know, when Jesus calls us the salt and the light of the world, he is saying that he wants something to be seen out of our lives. When he sends us in the same way that his Father sent him, he's telling us that we are his agents, sent to do the same thing that he did, to make disciples. And we must add speaking. There is also speaking to be done. We need to be conscious about it, we need to be modeling, and we need to be speaking. People need to hear the truth, to understand the why and the what. You know, there will always be a need to share something, some teaching, either gently or more intensely, depending on where that person is and how willing they are, how ready they are to hear. But we should say something. And by the way, we only share what it is that we already know. Paul, when he was talking to his disciple Timothy, he tells him, you know, teach people, you know, whatever you have heard me teach in the presence of witnesses, teach to others. So he's not asking Timothy, you know, go and make up your own things and try. He's saying what you've heard, what you've learned, that's what you teach. And God never expects of us to give what we don't have. So you know, if you're a new believer, maybe it's just sharing your story. And that's enough. It can be as simple as sharing, you know, what is God doing in my life and what has changed? Why have I changed? In 1 Peter 3, verse 15, it says, in your hearts, set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. So as you're living your life, there'll be questions, there'll be issues, there'll be things that people need to hear to explain the things that you are doing. And so we need to be ready to speak and to share these things. But please never forget, you know, that there's this saying, there's this common saying, you know, your actions are speaking so loud that I can't hear a word you're saying. Your actions speak so loud. And so it starts with modeling the life that Jesus lived, speaking and teaching when appropriate, but always modeling the life of Christ as you represent him in the world. You know, so when you're in your office, when you help a colleague, you know, just in the coaching that prepares them for that next promotion, you know, that is modeling Jesus Christ. When you help that neighbor who is in a crisis, that is modeling Christ. You know, even in something as simple as passing a cup of tea, you're helping. You know, the other day I was having a struggle putting a certain file onto our joint files as the staff team. You know, these things that people put in the cloud. I'm not so competent at those things. And somebody says, "Oh no, Pastor, I'll help you. You don't need to worry about that. I'll help you." And this is all discipleship, because that's discipleship that's relevant for my day-to-day living today in the things that I am doing. You are the model that other people will be seeing and they'll be learning from and growing on. They can take that model as a way towards the life of Christ. And as they learn that model, they can pass it on to others so that we fulfill that command to make disciples who not just know, but people who obey the commands of God, each of us in our turn. So who do we disciple? Who are these people that we are to disciple? Who are we to influence? Well, everyone, including non-believers. Jesus discipled non-believers. You know, when you read the Gospels, you'll find something very interesting. You'll see that the people that were, you know, following Jesus, even being called his disciples, there were many of them who were there, but they weren't yet true believers. In John chapter 6, verse 66, after he had confronted his followers with some hard teaching, the Bible says from this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. They weren't believers, but they were learning from him. They were watching his life. They were attending his teachings when he was teaching. They were following him around wherever he went, watching him heal people, watching him interact with people in different ways. And so they were learning, even though they decided at some point, no, they made that decision. But somehow, Jesus was discipling them. And he was conscious about it. He was aware. He wasn't waiting for people to say, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. He wasn't waiting for them to be converted before he would disciple them. Even those people that were closest to him. As I pointed out, he starts by saying, come and see. And he eats with them, he walks with them, he does his work as they watch and they observe him. They are learning. They are becoming disciples. He was helping them to know the way of God before they became believers. And it's, only that he seems to intensify things after Peter leads the 12 and saying, I am a follower. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. So please remember that making disciples of all nations, that's the command. It's not making converts. It's making disciples. Conversion is God's work. Matthew 16, verses 16 and 17, we have that story that I've just referred to where Peter speaks up. The Bible says, Simon Peter answered him, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus replied, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. This was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. Conversion is God's work. Ours is to take people on the journey as disciple makers. Conversion is God's work. And do we disciple believers? Yes. That's the other group that we disciple. The Bible says, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. That's a call. That's what Paul said, but it's a call for all of us. It's how we walk together. We are all helping one another to become better at following Christ. We are always needing to learn from one another a little bit more about how to live better in our world today in obedience of Christ, to reflect Jesus better. We learn from the way somebody else is reflecting Jesus as we follow Christ. The Bible says that we grow better together. And I want you to engage with the family, and that's the underlying place. Engage with the family of God. As Christians, we were never meant to walk alone. We learn from each other. We disciple each other. As I learn, it may benefit you. As you learn, it's going to benefit me. As you speak about the experience of God in your life, now God becomes alive and speaks to me, not in the words of 2,000 years ago, what's written in the scripture, but now in the words that he is writing on your life. And it becomes so much more real to me as I hear from you and as we walk together. Just listen to these two passages. Colossians chapter 3, verse 16. Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. As we are expressing ourselves, the things that we are learning, we are helping each other. Hebrews 10, 24 and 25. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, but encouraging one another. And there are so many other passages like this that we need to be walking together, encouraging, spurring each other on so that the work of God might be complete, that we will become better disciples, better reflecting the life of Jesus Christ. And there's only one command, only one new command that Jesus gave. It's in John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35. Jesus says, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. We are better together, and our relationships with other Christians actually improve and validate us as followers of Jesus. If you want, do you want to point people towards the life of Jesus Christ? You want your life to speak of the love of Jesus Christ and for people to see Jesus through your life? One of the most central parts of that thing that you are going, of your life as a disciple and of your witness to other people about the life of Christ is in loving other Christians. And so it's so important that we are connected with other Christians and walking in fellowship with other Christians, that we are growing together. Without that close contact, somehow we are removing a very big part of what Jesus says will speak about him. in the world out there. You need to be connected with others. So that's why we really need you to be connected in CLGs. I want everybody, not just, you just need to be walking together in a love relationship with other Christians. You're never meant to walk alone. Finally, the sixth question, what is it that I need so that I could be effective? What do I need so that I would be effective at making disciples? And the answer is the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit. This is one of the very first passages that I learned as a memory verse when I was a young believer, and it just really, I believe it really made a difference in the way my life would be and my willingness to just be used by God in different ways. He says in 2 Corinthians 3, 5-7, it's not that we are competent in ourselves to claim anything for ourselves, but our competence comes from God. He makes us competent as ministers of a new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. It's not just about content, people. It's the Holy Spirit. It's the presence of God in our lives. It's really not how much I know. It's how much I am aligned with God and how I'm walking together with God and I'm being enabled by God. Jesus himself said it's my connection with him. He is the vine, I am the branches. If I am connected with him, I will bear much fruit. This is at the center of everything. From the day that you became a believer, you became a carrier of the message and of the love of Jesus Christ. And the Bible tells us that the Holy Spirit enters your life the moment that you become a believer. And he is the one who will enable you to carry out this mission that Jesus gave us in this great commission. That he is present in your life and he will enable you. It's more than just what you know. It's who is in you that makes the difference. He makes you competent. He makes me competent. So engage. Engage, in your CLGs. Help one another to see how we can discover your mission now. That's where we're headed now. Discover your mission now. And not just to discover this mission, but to engage it. To start doing the things that reflect that you are sent by God and he has a purpose for you that you can live in. So here are some action points as we prepare ourselves for this spiritual emphasis campaign. If you're not yet in a CLG, if you're not yet in a small group, sign up today. We'll link you. But it's really important that we are working together as we fulfill this thing that we are called to. And it's part of the multiple reinforcements that we'll be having during this campaign. The second thing I want you to do is to commit yourself to attend all the Sunday services of this campaign from February 24th to March 31st. And they'll be great. They're designed specifically to help you, discover your mission, to express your relationship with God, to grow in your relationship with God, to know God's empowerment for your life. And if you can't make it on a Sunday, at least go and listen to the sermon. There's the live feed on Facebook or, you can connect through YouTube. Listen and hear that we can be walking together. Get the book and do that weekly reading every week. Just one chapter before you meet with your CLG, where you can discuss what you're learning from the sermons and what you're learning from the book and encourage one another on and start thinking of the practical things that you can do. And of course, then that follows that I want you to commit yourself to be part of your CLG meetings and activities. Those meetings are important. The activities, there are other activities that are planned. Your CLG leaders have already been told about them, and there's a schedule for them. Make sure that you are part of the CLG meetings and activities. And then finally, memorize the weekly memory verses that we will be giving to you, because they will help reinforce the lessons that you are learning. Work on memorizing. Do you know if you memorize a passage for 6 weeks, if you work on that memorization for 6 weeks, that passage is yours for life. It will stay with you the whole of your life, and it will always be able to guide you and strengthen you at times when you're feeling that weakness or you're not sure of what you ought to be doing. When we are thinking about discipleship, one of the statements that we have written down in our working plan as a church, the Kariithi Community Chapel Discipleship Working Plan, is that we want to help disciples. We want to help all of us to reflect this kind of discipleship, because we are called to be disciples who are growing in their love for God and love for their neighbor and are consciously helping others on the path toward Christ. We are growing in learning how to love God, to love our neighbor, to do it practically, and are consciously helping others on that path, because this is what God has called us to. And that's our prayer for you. During this time, as we walk through this whole period, that is my prayer for you, that as you discover your mission, you will start finding all that God has provided for you, that you might know how to love Him, how to love your neighbor, and how to walk with others and help them towards where God is. Your work is to point people towards God. Don't forget that conversion isn't your work, that's God's work. They have to respond, they have to be, they're the ones to say yes. But our work is to make disciples. That is the call that has been made to us.